We will break down recovery into 3 phases: abstinence, recovery, and sobriety. The abstinence phase covers the first 90 days. The recovery phase is 90 through 180 days, 3 through 6 months, and the sobriety phase is from 6 months through life. Many of the recovery industry's shortcomings are due to placing too much emphasis on shorter-term achievements. In a wishful thinking perception of quick recoveries, it is essential to have a scientific strategy that extends beyond the fundamental strategies of recovery. Short-term fundamental strategies cannot simply be repeated with more effort if one is to have long-term success. We need to implement appropriate strategies for each phase of recovery, as it is an evolutionary process. What worked in month 1 cannot simply be repeated in month 2, month 18, or month 80. Existing strategies must be combined with new strategies for each appropriate phase. New dimensions and new practices need to be implemented for each phase of recovery. The abstinence phase requires specific approaches, attitudes, and strategies, which I will go on to explain in more detail. Since withdrawal and detox occurs in the abstinence phase, we'll begin there. Withdrawal and detox. Tissue loading. As an individual uses a substance, the body tries to remove it as it would any other toxin. Drugs go into the inbox of the body, and the physiological systems try to push it all out through the outbox. Problems arise when we continue to pile more work into the inbox. As using becomes more frequent, the workload on the body becomes overwhelming, like a teenager who had a party when mom and dad were out and is now trying to clean up as they are pulling into the driveway. The party mess gets shoved into drawers, closets, under the rugs, anywhere it can be hidden. For future elimination, the body stores its drug molecules in drawers and closets in the form of fat cells and muscle tissues. This is called tissue loading. The addict wakes up superficially clean each morning, but there's still a big mess underneath it all. At first glance, the house appears clean. The party's messy aftermath may not be visible, but it's still there, under the rugs and stuffed into the closets. The addict's inbox is overflowing, and a lot of work needs to be done since months or even years of residual substances have been stored in the fat cells and muscle tissues of the body. The body loads tissues for 2 reasons. 1, it's biological. The lungs, liver, kidneys, and other organs and tissues are simply full. There's no room for more stuff in the organs, so drug substances get broken down into molecular components and put aside with the body's biological intention of taking out the trash later. 2, it's physiological. The now drug-dependent body saves some drugs. The physical and psychological need for drugs causes the body to store them in reserve, like wheat in a farmer's silo. If the addict ever deprives the body and mind of drugs, there is now a reserve stash in the fat cells and muscle tissues. Detox. When an addict stops using, he or she goes through an acute detox phase. Symptoms vary by DOC. Acute detox occurs when the body eliminates substances from the liver, kidney, lungs, and other organs. Once acute detox subsides, addicts mistakenly believe they are done. But after acute detox, the body begins to slowly extract the residual stored substances from the fat cells and muscle tissues, the stored reserves in the silo, to eliminate them. This process intensifies in cycles, much like a washing machine going through various cycles. The cleansing process is ongoing and constant and goes through a hypercleansing cycle approximately every 30 days after abstinence begins until it is entirely clean. With each cleansing cycle, trace amounts of the stored substances are released from the tissue cells, making it into the bloodstream. That's right, trace amounts of drugs are released into the bloodstream, causing the addict to be at extremely high risk for relapse. What happens when an addict gets a whiff, a sniff, a taste, or a sight of his or her DOC? The impulse to use is awakened intensely. Drug exposure in any way is a serious trigger, and now it is being released into the bloodstream directly. Since addicts are ignorant to this physiological process, they do not know why they are suddenly being triggered. Seemingly out of nowhere, their compulsion to use is overwhelmingly strong. It can seem very subtle, like having more frequent thoughts of using without knowing why, or more severe, as when one long-term heavy user told me he actually got a slight buzz from the drug molecules moving through his system, triggering him to crave intensely. When these trace amounts of drug molecules make it into the bloodstream, they travel the same routes as always, through organs and even past the blood-brain barrier into the brain, making tiny but sometimes noticeable SDNE impacts. Once a drug has made it into the bloodstream and therefore into the brain, the impulse to use will be overwhelming. This cleansing process interacts with the psychological as well. As a newly clean addict abstains from drugs, his or her brain and mind become very agitated. It uses the usual pleasure-pain principle pressure, but realizes that this time the usual is not enough to persuade using. So it pulls out the big guns. It says, "Won't give me drugs, huh? Okay, have it your way." Bam! It hits you with irritability. "Still won't give me the drugs, huh? Okay, bam! Now you can't sleep. Bam! Now you're depressed. Bam! Now you're angry. confused and causing fights with loved ones and employers. Addiction is like an alien living in your brain that is sitting in the captain's chair of your mind. It has access to all the buttons in your mind and brain, including physiological ones. The release of stored residual drugs into the bloodstream gives you a teaser, cueing you to use more. It's screaming, the silo is almost empty and you better refill with more dope. Between the physiological and psychological factor, it's nothing short of a miracle anyone ever gets sober. But we do, all the time, so it can be done. 3 hypercleansing rounds are triggered at approximately 30, 60, and then 90 days, give or take 5 to 7 days in either direction. There is another small cycle at 120 days, but it is usually so insignificant that it is not perceived, though it should be anticipated as well. At those specific intervals, more of the drug is released into the bloodstream, triggering the impulse to use. Only at the end of 120 days of total absence has someone truly detoxed. No more drug molecules reside in the cells or tissues. Finally, withdrawal. Withdrawal is a result of the physiological functions having become dependent upon a substance to function, becoming reliant upon the presence of the drug to perform their functions. Over time, organs and body functions atrophy through non-use. Long-term methamphetamine use caused my adrenal gland to rely on the drug to stimulate it into action. And once the drug was no longer present, my adrenal gland had forgotten how to do its job and would not produce adrenaline on its own. It takes a long time for an organ to relearn its function and be able to perform again, and its inability to function will cause debilitations, pain, and discomfort. This is what withdrawal is, the body relearning how to function on its own without the presence of the drug it has become dependent on. While the body is detoxing, it is also withdrawing, a double whammy, as the discomfort of detox, cleansing, and withdrawal, atrophied organs, happens simultaneously. Incidents of using etch the drug, the behavior, and its association more prominently into the subconscious mind as well. The detox process is filled with suffering and misery. Over 100 days are required to fully eliminate chemical toxins from our bodies and our brains. Knowing this science helps us mentally make sense of things and helps us not only to record progress, but to remain committed to it. Knowledge is power, and the ability to make sense of something extraordinary is comforting. If you are running a marathon and were feeling you could not finish the run due to overwhelming fatigue, you might consider giving up. However, if you were informed you had already run 25 of the 26 miles of the race, you'd be very likely to apply mental strength to your physical stamina and somehow be able to finish that last mile. You would tell yourself, I'll be damned if I suffered for 25 whole miles for nothing. I've come this far and I can see the finish line, so I am pressing on. Knowing how far you've come and how far you've got left can be an integral motivator. The next section breaks down the 90-plus day detox process so we can gauge and prepare for it. It is followed by a thorough review of the mental, behavioral, and emotional challenges and strategies needed during the abstinence phase. 30 days, first month. The first month of detox withdrawal is the acute phase, as a majority of the toxins are getting broken down and flushed to the physiological surface for elimination. Our body chemistries, immune systems, and tissues are breaking down the most prevalent toxins and working them into the sweat glands, urinary tract, and intestines, which is painful and uncomfortable. Each drug is different, with some being more acute than others, but they will take their toll when they are getting eliminated, making their presence known in the following ways. Sleeplessness or fatigue, depending on the drug detoxing. Muscle aches, pains, and body tensions. Nausea, intestinal pain, and discomfort. Loss of or increased appetite. Headaches, dizziness, imbalance, or incoordination, all or some of these. Raw emotions, moods, and thoughts like paranoia, hopelessness, and other toxic thinking. All of these symptoms come in waves as chemicals are broken down and worked into the position for elimination by the body. Some days are better than others, and some days are worse. Never think that whatever you're presently feeling is that particular stage's full expression. Bad days won't last, so don't give up because of them. Good days won't last either, so don't get too attached to them. 60 days, second month. Congratulations, you've made it to an important milestone, and no one can take that away. Even if you relapse and turn back into a chronic dope fiend tomorrow, you still have this accomplishment under your belt, and nothing can ever undo that you did indeed make it through 30 days. Many of the substances in your body chemistry and tissues have been eliminated. As long as you don't replace them, it's permanent. Your body has eliminated the top layers of these toxins, and now it will begin to work on the less accessible toxins, the ones stored in your tissues on the smaller, cellular, and molecular levels. What follows is a list of the symptoms you'll experience during the second month: sleeplessness or fatigue, insomnia or hypersomnia, depending on the drug detoxing, muscle aches, pains and body tension, nausea, intestinal pain and discomfort, loss of or increased appetite, headaches, dizziness, imbalance, and incoordination, raw emotions, mood, and thoughts like paranoia, hopelessness, and other toxic thinking. Sound familiar? Well, it should, as this is the exact same list from the 30-day list. The difference is that the symptoms you'll experience after 60 days may be less acute, becoming more subtle and therefore sneaky. At this point, it can be harder to identify whether symptoms are the actual result of drug detox and can mistakenly be identified as just feeling crappy in a much more normal way. Realize that your body, brain, and mind are still going through intense detox. 90 plus days. Wow. Congratulations, really. The toxins are finally working their way to the actual surface of your body and being eliminated entirely. Your body is now breaking them down to molecular size and distributing them through the waste elimination system, which includes the conventional waste processes. But these molecules are also working their way out of your pores and any other small orifices or apertures. These toxins have their own survival mechanisms and can sense that their days are now numbered. Anything threatened goes into survival mode and desperately defends itself. Often, the third month is the most challenging and difficult. The finish line is in sight, and this pathology is going to pull out all the stops to fight you, so be vigilant. The brain and body has stored molecules of these toxins in remote areas in case of emergency, and will try to extract and use them to compensate for what you are no longer providing it. In order to help your body get through this tumultuous period, the following procedures are important. Intensify healthy regimens such as rest, the correct amount of exercise, not too much, not too little, vitamin supplements, a fortifying diet, not junk food, and lots of fluids. Hydrate, hydrate, hydrate. Try to prepare for uncomfortable, unconventional, and unpredictable mental states and physical discomfort. Expect them, so when and if they arrive, you are in a slightly better position to take them in stride and endure them. Expect the worst, prepare for the best. This is a general preparation, as it is not wise or possible to prepare for specific situations. Life may get weird at any moment, so don't act surprised. Today's video is just a brief introduction to the recovery phases. Each chapter includes detailed instructions how to proceed with these challenging phases. Remember that each phase is very different and has different needs. 98% of relapses occur within those first 90 days, making it essential to apply the right strategies at the right time. The right strategy applied at the wrong time will bring disaster, but the right one at the right time can minimize suffering and get you moving forward, finally. Coping with detox. Each drug-specific section in this book will advise you on how to minimize this detox experience. But to start with, be active. It is important to stay active as much as you can without making yourself too uncomfortable. Do you feel motivated to mow the lawn? Good, go for it. Now that you have the mower out and have gotten started, all of a sudden an intense sense of fatigue and frustration might beset you. That's okay. Just abandon the project and wait until the impulse to mow the lawn returns and start again. It might take 5 or 6 attempts to follow through with any project, and that's okay. Try to go as far as you can comfortably on any project. And do not convince yourself that starting anything is a waste of time if you cannot finish it. It'll get done eventually if you at least begin the work. Think progress, not perfection. Each moment you spend in motion is beneficial, and those moments add up. 5 minutes completed of a 45-minute chore is 5 minutes of motion benefit. Later on, do another 5 or maybe even 10 minutes and keep adding them up. Eventually, the chore will be done. If you push yourself too much, it can become counterproductive to the detoxing, but not enough movement stalls it too. Find the balance of the right amount. While staying active, be cautious about actions that could trigger physical and emotional responses that lead to relapse. If you force yourself to finish everything you start, regardless of how you feel, you're increasing your risk of relapse by pushing yourself too far. If you abandon every attempt without even at least beginning it, you're increasing your risk of relapse through feelings of failure. Other things to keep in mind in order to minimize the negative effects of the drug detox experience include the following. Try at least a little to meet your everyday obligations. Stop, if needed, working on those everyday needs. Do not feel guilty if you need to stop. Feel proud of any commitment that you followed through on. Self-affirmation is therapeutic. Keep involvements minimal and priorities due to necessities. Shower, toilet, eat, go to the job or school. These are necessities. Wait on new projects and commitments if possible. Now we'll review the mental, behavioral, and emotional challenges and strategies needed during the 90-day abstinence phase. Coping at 30 days. The main ingredient for the first 30 days is to ensure that there are little to no changes in life. A new job, new relationship, job training, a new education, all of these activities can be too much. We don't want new elements in our lives to overwhelm us, even if they are seemingly good ones. The mind has a limited capacity, and once it's full, even with good things, it will shut down either sections of it or the whole thing. If you get overwhelmed, you're at risk. Keeping it simple requires counterintuitive sense. It would seem that a new job, relationship, or class to attend would be an empowering and good thing. However, each involves a lot of stimuli, and even the good experiences have a limited amount of charm and positivity. Once our minds become even slightly complacent or the responsibilities become pressures, we are at risk, as we always want to replace or re-stimulate the good feelings we were having when it began. It makes no difference if our minds are full from good or bad stuff. Full is full, and when we're full, we cannot function. At this critical time, we need our minds to function so we can sustain commitment to our goals. By the same token, it is just as important to not consciously focus, fixate, or dwell on abstinence. This intensity will wear on us to a point that our consciousness will shut down and wind up deferring to the subconscious, which is the lair and domain of addictions. We need all of our faculties if we are to even have a chance at prevailing, so we cannot compromise our strength or inner resources. Be aware of your abstinence commitment and let it run at high volume in the foreground, but allow yourself to exist and think beyond it too. Keeping it simple. That new job, class, or relationship may be sweet, but all new things require attention and make life more complex. We need life to be simple for a while. The simpler, the better. This is contrary to the addict's nature, as the very drive to do drugs in the first place comes from a need for complexities and textures in life, an escape from the mundaneness of everyday life. The simple life would be to take it easy, but you may become physically and mentally restless, needing more. Most addicts resist the simple life, so expect restlessness and agitation and try to coexist with them and the discomfort. As you're warned against starting new relationships, there are similar warnings for ending old ones. Unless a relationship is truly toxic or dangerous, it is best not to break it off until after the 90+ day period. This has been reviewed in the section on supportive people. Your attention during the first 30 days should be on imperative things: your work, classes, doing the dishes, eating, going to the bathroom, sleeping, taking out the trash. Meeting and fulfilling are your obligations and requirements, and basically nothing else. For example, Daniel, a 30-something gay alcoholic man, wanted very much to get into shape now that he was no longer drinking. I advised him to keep his workouts to a minimum so he wouldn't get too depleted physically or mentally. I advised him to run a quarter mile a day, maybe a half mile, but to wait a while before pushing too hard. You'll be tempted to run more, I said. It will feel good, and if a little is good, more is better, right? Much of the encouragement your mind is giving you is originating from your addictive mind, as it is counting on you to be being tired, depleted, and taking on too much so it can take advantage of you in a weakened state. Taking on too much, absence, work, changes, fitness, and so on is a very common error. It always backfires. He didn't listen. Every day he ran and went to the gym to capitalize on the new sober feeling he was having, and, you guessed it, he relapsed. Fitness is a good thing, but everything in the beginning needs moderation and parameters, except abstinence. So keep it to the basics during the first 30 days. Work. Pay the bills, see the doctor, walk the dog, clean the house, put gas in the car. Other things will indeed come up that are not basic routine life needs. Discuss them with your counselor or supportive people so awareness is factored in. Some compensatory actions, such as checking in with your support person more often, limiting your amount of new obligations, and setting other boundaries, can create a conscious awareness of risk. Awareness alone can make all the difference. Avoiding certain things and people. It is important to avoid all drug-using people and environments. You don't need the temptation. Remember that temptation is cumulative.
I may say no to ice cream at the party where it was offered, and I may successfully say no to it at the restaurant the next night. But then, seemingly out of nowhere, on the third night, I'm plowing through a carton in the privacy of my own home. These temptations were managed the previous 2 nights, so is my later ice cream binge related to the prior temptations? Of course, temptation is cumulative. It builds pressure. Having no exposure to people or environments where using takes place is the assured practice. Avoid the reality shows about recovery, or even your favorite TV shows or movies which casually, comfortably, or frequently display using. It might seem extreme, but remember that your subconscious is on the prowl. It does not care if the show is about meth and you're into opiates. Your subconscious will connect the dots and fill in the blanks. Being accountable. Your support team should always know where you are and what you're up to. You've been reverted back to 5-year-old status. A 5-year-old has to check in and be checked on frequently. You do too. I ask my clients to stay in touch all the time, especially when I sense risk. I take up a remote presence in their consciousness, and it subtly helps them be more aware and accountable. I don't ride them, criticize them, or rule over them. I just stay in touch, making my presence known, and my presence represents sobriety. Drug screening. Yes, do it once per week. Just knowing you're getting tested will make it more difficult to use and force you to be honest with yourself. Remember that screening is not a punitive measure. It is an assisted way of focusing. It will give you recognition for being clean and hold you accountable for being dirty. Coping at 60 days. Calculated risks. If abstinence has been maintained for the first 30 days, it is time to let out the leash a little when you get to the 60-day stage. It's not a reward, as the tighter leash wasn't a punishment to begin with. Letting the leash out is a way of exploring the varying dimensions of this new experience of not being on dope. You now need to experience some calculated managed risks so you can develop the skill of surpassing them. We cannot get or stay clean with theory or simple intellectual understanding. Make sure you have limited access to the outside world. Your cell phone, visits, money, keep them limited and monitored. Doing less simple things. It may now be time to enroll in that class or go on that date. You're not ready for a full relationship or an advanced postgraduate level class, but it's time to branch out slightly. That date should occur maybe once per week, no more. That class should be maybe a single class, but not a full schedule, and not one that is critical to your degree or career yet. While it is time to expose yourself to projects and experiences, these projects and experiences should not be integral to your future or success. This way, if it becomes necessary to pull back, you can endure the loss. This decreases the pressure and allows you to focus on the task and perform without focusing on the cost if you don't succeed. Being challenged is good. Too simple would be stagnation, but critical challenges may be more stressful than challenging. It is now safe to add a few new things into your life. New things would not be excessive, as you need to leave room for things you cannot anticipate, a car repair, the dog running away, and so on. There are so many emergencies that can be the straw that broke the camel's back, so we need to create a surplus of brain power, like a savings account. Hopefully, the little extra money set aside is never needed, but you never know. Save some brain cells for a rainy day. Continuing to avoid. Continue to avoid connections and users at all costs. You are not in a position to help them in their recovery and not even ready to hang out with friends you've used with or who are also staying clean. Unless they've achieved a strong 6 months or more clean, your exposure should be kept to either zero or only what is essential. Essential means they must be providing you with food or shelter or saving your life. You don't even know who you are yet, so how can you possibly know whether the friends you used with are friends you will actually miss and count on or not? It's safest to keep it to no exposure to users or using associates for the time being and little exposure to any using environments or media. Yes, you can go to the local restaurant for food and coffee, even if it has a bar, but no, you cannot go to the local hangout where a percentage of the people may be holding or using. It doesn't matter if the dope stays in their pockets. Addicts have a dope fiend sixth sense. I don't have to know it consciously. My subconscious radar is picking it up, filing it away, and slowly adding it to every other exposure and temptation stored in the back of my mind. Continuing to be accountable. You will need to be accountable to supportive people for your presence, location, and activities. It can be slightly relaxed from before, but not entirely. Share the day's plans with them and check in on 1 or 2 times a day. It is easy to get lazy here if you've made progress. Everyone, including and especially supportive people, wants to live a normal life. I know I should call, but what the hell? Things have been good, and I'm sure things are good now too. Besides, I have a lot to do right now. Famous last words. Whatever parameters were set and agreed upon for the first 30 days are only modifiable by 20% or less. Drug screening. Keep it up, no changes. Coping at 90 days. Doing things even less simple, but not too complex. After 60 days of absence, you can modify the simple life, but still not by much. A 65-35 ratio is acceptable now. The same parameters from month 1, but decreased so that the ratio is 65% simplicity to 35% complexities. I know these are rather vague formulas, as life simply does not break down to mathematical percentages, but we need to apply mathematical mentality because there is no literal scientific measuring device for this. The 90-day mark means taking 1 more class, making 2 dates per week every other week, while keeping to 1 date per week on the week in between, and working out twice as much as the first month, but not to what you think is your 100%. The complexity you permit yourself at this point should be proportionate to your absence time, not to how sober you feel. You haven't spent enough time being sober to know anything about being sober any more than I know about Spanish culture by taking a Spanish class or seeing a travel show on Spain. You know more than you did, to be sure, but you're far from being an expert. Avoiding old places. I do not go to the local dog park or the local bowling alley. I've got nothing against them. I just don't own a dog or a bowling ball, so there's really nothing there entertaining for me. If you feel the need to connect or stay connected with your past, it is because you've not yet created a satisfying present or future. You should not feel guilty for abandoning those friends who are still using and in need. The best thing you can do for them is to break free of this using life and become the inspiring "where is he now" guy or gal. I did not abandon my old drug friends or culture. I moved on, and so did they, one way or the other. Going for screening. Go 2 to 4 times a month. As a sober person, I truly wouldn't care if my partner wanted to test me every day. I'd probably enjoy the opportunity to rub it in. What kind of addict doesn't want to test? A dirty one. Especially if I'm not paying for the test. Why should I care? If a lapse occurs, repeat the prior month's parameters for at least 2 weeks and then pick up where you left off where the lapse occurred. If a relapse occurs, then the entire 30, 60, and 90 plus days must be redone. The difference between lapse and relapse is explained in the section on lapses and relapses. It is not possible to determine which one of the 3 months will be the most intense. It varies from drug to drug and person to person. Logic and reason infer that the first month would be the worst and the months would get progressively easier. But what about addiction adheres to logic and reason? Each individual has a different unique makeup. Therefore, absolutely any stage could be the worst one of them all. Never think on a tough day, week, or month that the next one's bound to get better, as that is possibly more deception coming to you from the addicted subconscious. The second month could be worse than the first, and the third could be the worst of all. There's simply no way to know in advance which one it'll be.